Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars: A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft, and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, the commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hey, good evening, everyone. It is great to see you here on this Tuesday night. I'm Heath. I'll be your host here for Table Talk. Welcome to my home, welcome to my office, and welcome to Table Talk. It is great to see everybody. We're going to have a real chill evening tonight. I went to see War of the Rohirrim a couple of days ago, and I have some thoughts on it. And I was like, Because I don't think very many people went to go and see it. So I was like, who can talk about this with me? Well, there aren't too many people, but James Bacon is here, and he has some thoughts on how he would have pitched the Rings of Power to Amazon. So I thought, okay, this will be a great kind of conversation to have, because I'll talk to him about what I think about the Rings of Power, the War of the Rohirrim, and the problems with it and making movies of that kind. I'm not going to get deep into like the lore or, whether or not something is right as it was written in the appendix or things like that. We're going to talk about it from the storytelling perspective and trying to make a movie like that. And then he's going to do the same. He's going to come back with the Rings of Power. So welcome, James Bacon. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Thank you very much for being here. Like I said, different kind of conversation here, because I was like, who's going to go out and see the War of the Rohirrim? I didn't even know that it was going to be a theatrical release until I accidentally found out about it like a week before. I was looking for potential movies to see over Christmas and Christmas breaks, the Christmas break. And so like a movie to see Christmas Day, I think that was how I found it. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. War of the Rohirrim is actually going to be a theatrical release. I didn't even know. And originally I was going to take the nephews. I thought, you know what? I'll just take the nephews to see that on like when it opened Friday night. As it turns out, I had to do other things for Christmas parties Friday night. But I went to see it, I believe, Sunday. And they didn't get to go because it's prime real estate the weekend before Christmas and all of that. So I just went. I gave it a try. That my idea was I was just gonna give it a try. But hey, Bacon, you want to introduce yourself? I'm gonna put up your channel right here.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Bacon. I mean, I'm gonna say I run the Better with Bacon YouTube channel. It's legit just me. I don't run myself. I do put up a video now and again, though. We have a lot of live conversations as well. Mostly we discuss role-playing games, as in tabletop role-playing games. The different, conversations that come out of that, be it alignment, or currently I'm running a series on tabletop RPGs as a modern kind of myth. It's a series that I'm running. It's going to be, I mean, the more I look into it, the more I read, the longer the video series is going to get. So I don't know when it's going to end. I'm just going to kind of go with it, see where it ends up. We also have live conversations. Heath has participated with regard to the Dragon Slayer. So we have movie conversations as well. Channel's kind of modeled a little bit on Heath's channel because it's all the stuff I like to talk about. Sable Phoenix is there. I have other guests on, Jax, Ben, Blaze. Sometimes the videos that I make upset people and they get a lot of hits. And sometimes the videos that I make don't upset anyone and they stagnate. But that's okay. I'm going to just, this isn't a living. I'm just getting my ideas out there. So I'm going to keep doing that. And if people love it, great. If they don't, that's okay.
All right. So I put the link there in the chat. Let's see who we got here. I see Charlie. Welcome, Charlie. Good evening, Charlie. We got the Titter Pig Rancher here. Good evening. BGD is also here. And BGD is also putting out that your discussions are great.
Oh,
very thought-provoking. All right. So I guess we should go ahead and get started. I mean, I don't know if tonight's going to be like a 6-hour discussion or anything like that. And actually, after watching the War of the Rohirrim, I was like, okay, I'm glad we have something else to talk about because I can say my thoughts, but I don't think we have like 2 hours of discussion on War of the Rohirrim or anything like that, even though we tend to go deep. I decided, okay, I had 2 movies to go and see over Christmas. Because I was like, okay, I'll go see the War of the Rohirrim. And I'll go see it in the spirit of just going to try something new. That like I didn't have great expectations for it. And in fact, I even barely watched the trailer. Originally, I didn't even know that it was not set during the War of the Ring. This is material that's drawn about Helm Hammerhand, and so like I intentionally from the appendix of the Return of the King, and so I intentionally had stayed away from all of that. Later, just before I went, I did find out that okay, this is Helm Hammerhand, and okay, this is earlier than the War of the Ring. So I went in very cold. I was like, I'm not going to do any kind of deep dive into this or anything like this. I'm just going to kind of harken back to the days when I would just go to the movie theater without having, any type of, and just pick a movie that was on I'll go see that one. So I was like, I'll go and see this. It was the same kind of attitude that I went into War of the Rings of Power with, because when Rings of Power came out, Rings of Power was coming out with House of the Dragon. And we had come off of The Hobbit, which I didn't think was all that great. We had our discussion of The Hobbit, but then also the Game of Thrones last seasons, and so I mean there was a lot of negativity when those 2 things came out, and I said, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to watch both of these without any kind of preconceived notions and just see what happens. We'll just see what happens. I ended up turning off Rings of Power after it took me a while to get through even one episode. A few episodes. I think I don't even know if I finished the first season. I just turned it off. But then I ended up enjoying the House of the Dragon season 1. So, okay, you said, all right, whatever. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to watch it, and then we'll just see. So that was kind of the attitude that I came in with War of the Rohirrim with.
certainly something different, but I was like, all right, I'll just go to the movie theater. I will see it and I will see what I think. But I'm completely with you, James. You were like, this seems unnecessary, right?
Yes, it seemed unnecessary. I didn't see War the Rohirrim or Rohirrim or however you want to say it. But that's because I have recently, and I'll say recently, like after the Hobbit movie, I've kind of taken a stance on Tolkien that, I don't need any more. What I have is complete. In fact, the books are complete, right? So I would be happy if we lost all of the original footage for the films and all of the DVDs and 4K, discs just evaporated into thin air. I could still have the books and be very satisfied with what we have. The movies, Lord of the Rings, are great. The Hobbit movies are, again, we had this discussion. The Hobbit movies are not great, but I love them all the same. But after I had heard some things about the Rings of Power, specifically its canonicity, the issues that were going to come out of that, I was like, you know what? I don't need any more. And so I don't. And I'm not interested in video games like the Golem video game, from what I understand is awful anyway. But like, I just don't have any desire for any new Lord of the Rings stuff, because like there's a very important manner in which you have to. If I can soapbox for a minute, I don't mean to distract the conversation. Like, I sent myself a text earlier today because it was something that I was thinking about. I'm just going to read it straight here. So, Tolkien was attempting to write a myth, and regardless of how successful he was regarding that effort, the attempt elevated the story. And so, what modern writers are doing is they're lowering the aspiration and thereby impugning the integrity of Tolkien's attempt at myth, because they're merely trying to tell stories in this pre-existing world. And so because those are stories, they're outside of this sort of mythic aspiration. And they're also doing it with such a awful mindset that they can do it better, or it's just not. You can't write Tolkien better than Tolkien, right? He wrote it. It's his story. It's his attempt at a myth. And so what I have here finally is that, and pardon me for reading from my phone, but I texted it to myself. What you need when you try to adapt Tolkien is consistency, accuracy, and faithfulness. And we're not getting consistency. We're not getting accuracy, and we're not getting faithfulness. And that's
and sometimes it's deliberately the opposite of that.
Yes, sometimes it is absolutely deliberate.
Yeah, that we need to that consistency or adherence to some kind of canon or something like that is something that shouldn't constrain us or constrain writers or something like that. Which
that's it. You know what? Then go write your own story.
Go write your own story. I agree.
Like, if you don't want to be constrained, if you don't want to be bound by the expectations of an audience, then create your own story and create your own audience. That's just all there is to it.
So I am a big fan of Rohan, in general, in the
me
Lord
too.
Of the Rings. One day, I really hope that I get to do some type of Lord of the Rings role-playing game where I get to play a Knight of Rohan. I'd like to play one of the riders of Rohan. That would be a lot of fun. So I do have kind of a special place in my heart for Rohan. And so that was a plus and kind of a draw to this film. And I remember reading the appendix about Helm Hammerhand in whenever I was first reading The Return of the King. And years and years ago as a child, and how he punched the guy and killed him outright with the punch. Right. He may have died a little bit later, but killed him with the punch. And then he's like going outside of Helm's Deep and, dressed in white or whatever, and killing all of the foes that are coming out. So I remember reading all of that, and that is all neat, and to the good. There's not much information on this in the appendix, but what is there is intended from the story perspective of the Two Towers to provide history and depth to Helm's Deep. I remember that really speaking to me, or noticing all of that, especially as I was a kid when I was reading that about Helm's Dyke and the history of Helm's Deep. It wasn't just a fortress that they went to, for the battle in the Two Towers. It was a fortress that was connected to the history of Rohan through the character Helm Hammerhand and all of that. And so potentially revisiting that, or potentially visiting that theatrically is an interesting idea. On the surface, I can see that why this is a surface idea. They're like, okay, we need another film, and we're going to talk about what Titterpig Rancher's coming up with that in a moment here, because later I found that out that they basically put this out,
to retain the IP,
hold on to rights. And in retrospect, once you watch the show when they're talking about how it was fast tracked, or the movie, you definitely feel that, like, oh, okay, so this was. But okay, if you're talking about, okay, we need to do a new Lord of the Rings movie, or movie set in Middle Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Rohirrim, Helm's Deep, Helm Hammerhand. It would probably be on the short list somewhere. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a great topic. It's a great subject
to be on the short list. But on the other hand, whenever you do something like this, the creator of a movie, I thought the movie basically was forgettable. I mean, as far as you can go up to something being really bad and just hammering on something being really bad. I didn't really think this was really bad or anything like that, but it also wasn't anything great. I mean, at times I was bored during the movie, but it was okay. It was an okay movie. The characterization for most characters were weak. Helm Hammerhand was definitely the best character there. There was an older shield maiden that I really liked. I liked the archetype. There was a hag who lived in Helm's Deep. There were some elements there, but overall it was weakly characterized. Helm Hammerhand was generally the best. But you're going to have this problem when you try to do a story like this and try to do a new movie in this. Okay, so if you say, hey, let's do Rohan and Helm's Deep, and we're going to go back and tell a story from 200 years ago, you have a problem from the movie creation perspective, that if you do anything too new, people are going to say, hey, this doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings. This doesn't feel like the world. But on the other hand, you run the risk of just rerunning what you've already seen. So
very true.
I admit that this is a very difficult thing to do when you're setting out to do a story like this. And the bias appears to be to do what people have already seen. Now, we see this in a bunch of different franchises that, okay, because that's a big task. I mean, a noble task. It's one that writers should be able to stand up to be able to say, okay, we're going to go back to Rohan. We're even going to go revisit the set of Helm's Deep, which has been done so well in Peter Jackson's The Two Towers. But we're going to come up with a unique story that makes this, our own, and isn't just standing on making everybody go, hey, I remember being at Helm's Deep. Yeah, I loved the Battle of Helm's Deep. And not do that, So you have to make your own story, even though you're going to be in some of the same settings, and that's not easy. But you've still got to make sure that everybody feels like they're still in the same place. So that's not an easy challenge. I recognize that. That's not an easy challenge. And that's why, actually, even though you put something like Helm Hammerhand and Helm's Deep probably at the top, on the short list for, hey, let's return to it. On the other hand, there are, I think, substantial arguments to not do that. Okay, we need a Middle Earth movie. Let's not do that. Because we've already seen Helm's Deep. And the Battle of Helm's Deep and the Two Towers is one of the greatest battles in movie history. I mean,
Agreed.
Elf shield surfing notwithstanding, that aside, I would say the Battle of Helm's Deep is absolutely amazing. And so the thought of, okay, now I'm a new, no, he's not a new, but I'm a new director being brought on to the project. and be like, okay, do you remember that one thing was one of the most amazing things in cinema history? Okay, let's do that again in your movie. And you'd be like, no, please don't. Like,
it's
please
because you're
don't
never
make
going to
me.
measure up. You're never going to measure
never
up. You're
gonna
starting
measure
off
up.
on the back
Exactly.
foot. You are setting yourself up for failure if you do that. I agree.
That's right. So I think that because especially on a much smaller budget. I mean, of course, this is animated versus being live action. This was not a high budget animated film, and I'm not a critic of animation, but I mean, clearly we've seen some fantastic animation, like with Arcane and things like that. This wasn't anywhere near that. I didn't feel like this was anything to write home about. And so you're like, okay, I've got kind of a low budget film that I'm going to do animated, and I got to return to one of the greatest cinematic battles that, just no. So the answer should have been no.
Yes.
And come up with something else. And so this film definitely recalled like so many of the beats that we had already seen in the Two Towers. I mean, we've seen someone who is having Adoras attacked, and the king is hesitant to leave. There was even the scene in the throne room or in the Golden Hall where Éomer gets driven out, and he's going to be the one that comes back. He's going to be the aide unlooked for in the end that comes back. We had basically that exact same scene with I think the lead character's cousin, I think it was, or something like that. So he was this military leader, and the Helm Hammerhand gets mad at him and drives him out of the throne room. And like, okay, because he even says something like, even if you don't like, this is an exact quote, but even if you don't like me, you will always have my sword. And I was like, okay, he's going to be the one who comes back to save them at Helm's Deep. Not that I have a problem with the archetype of the help unlooked for, because that's one of my favorites, but it was set up so obviously, and also just a repeat of Éomer. That
Well, it's like poetry, Heath. It rhymes.
Right. I know. It's like, that's right. It's poetry. It rhymes. And so there was a lot of that. There were some new things too. I mean, there were new things too, but there were so many things that were repeats of what you had seen. And just seeing Helm's Deep again. Okay, we're going to see a Battle of Helm's Deep. We're going to see it under siege. That's enough of a repeat. I feel like if you're a writer or you're a director, I'm like, okay, the very fact that I'm going to be writing another Siege of Helm's Deep is enough copying and repeating. I've got to make sure that everything else is new. I mean, even the battle, the way that it ended when I was talking about this guy who comes back, I mean, he rides up over the exact same hill that Gandalf and Éomer ride up over, and then ride down into Helm's Deep in the exact same way.
I feel like culturally you get that you get that imagery to have an incredible impact once. That's it. That's all you get. And when someone does it, you're never, ever going to reach that peak again, even though people who read the book knew what was coming, right? But even still seeing it on screen, like almost exactly as you have envisioned it, because that's kind of the hallmark of the Lord of the Rings films, right? Is that very many characters and scenes and situations people will describe as exactly as they saw it in their mind's eye when they read the book. And once you do it once, like I said before, you're setting yourself up for failure if you try it again.
Yeah, don't try to repeat it. And I don't understand why they did that, other than, okay, maybe you are in a hurry because this is fast tracked and we're trying to get to this movie out or whatever. But the easier thing to write is the repeat. And I saw some people on Reddit who are like, okay, this is The Force Awakens. And other people are like, oh my God, this movie was so completely different from A Force Awakens that how can you even say that? And I was like, yeah, it's obviously different from Force Awakens, but it was the same. But I knew exactly what those people were saying, is that The Force Awakens, okay, we're going back to Star Wars for, the sequels. What do we do? I mean, they had the exact same problem. That we've got to, how do we make a new movie that makes everybody feel like they're in Star Wars without like repeating Star Wars? and they went with the, well, we'll just repeat Star Wars.
We'll just
route.
repeat Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. So there were so many things that's like, and some people call it like fan service. Like, but to me, I don't exactly know what people are talking about when they're talking about that. But if you're talking about, in Force Awakens, people really liked a trench run and blowing up a Death Star. We can do a trench run and blowing up a Death. That's just the repeat. It's the same thing. So I understood what they were saying. The people who were saying this on Reddit, I was like, you're right. The idea, it was like The Force Awakens because they decided to just repeat whole scenes, for this. And I didn't think it worked. Like I said, I thought it was boring. I thought it was weakly characterized. There were some good things. Like I said, the new parts about Helm Hammerhand were arguably the best. And I did like the new Shield, the Shield Maiden character. But so much of it was we're desperate inside Helm's Deep, which we have seen before. And this time it was basically if Eowyn had been able to lead a defense, and that she would be in charge of its defense.
It's an interesting idea.
It's an interesting idea, but I think I was trying to think, so how would you change that? I say if I had to do that, and basically this is, okay, if Eowyn were in charge of its defense, I think you have to make it an intensely character-driven film, because we've already had the action-oriented siege of Helm's Deep and storming of Helm's Deep done much better, with a higher budget in The Two Towers. So I think that if you were going to do this, then what you'd have to do is you'd have to get extremely personal with her. And like we talked about, like, okay, so this needs to be everything that matters to her, and to really understand that and be in her character. And the writing, wasn't good enough to do that. It was still very much going to be an action film about, okay, these guys are building I'm not going to get deep into critiques or anything, but one critique of dialogue that I always look at this, that I was watching, that they're all in Helm's Deep and the Dunlendings are surrounding them. And the Dunlendings are cutting down trees and are building something out of trees. And the main character and the older Shield Maiden that I liked were like looking at it going, what are they doing? What are they? And I'm thinking, well, they're probably building siege equipment.
They're setting up exposition.
I know. And that's so terrible. Like, I don't like the dialogue where it should be obvious, especially to like the older Shield. Especially to you, if you're in a castle and all of a sudden people are building things out of logs outside, they're probably building siege equipment. And so then then they were like, oh my God, they're building a siege tower. Like, well, I'm not surprised by that at all. They're probably building a siege tower if you are in. So like that kind of dialogue always bothers me. And there was some of that in there where the characters are really shocked, like by things they should not be shocked by. Like, what are you doing?
It also, distrusts the audience because they don't think that the audience is smart enough to be able to pick up on it. But like, okay, so give us a little bit of a time lapse. Show them cutting the trees down, then show them erecting a siege tower, and then, it'll click. You don't have to make them say silly, dumb things like that. Because that's what that is. It's silly and it's dumb.
Yes, it was. So I'm looking at my notes here. I was dictating a bunch of notes after I came out of the movie theater, but I think that's basically it. On the high level, that's why this didn't work, and why this isn't going to be any kind of masterpiece of a film. And then it's and then you find out what Titterpig says. Yes, that actually, and I read this later, like on my way home or something, because I intentionally didn't look up any kind of reviews or anything like that.
Yeah, sure.
Before I went to see it, but then after I went to see it, I was looking up some reviews, and then the studio had put out the notice that, well, basically this was greenlit speed run. There was the term I was using, whatever, but hurried out the door, and to get done, things like that, because New Line Cinema had to do some type of Middle Earth film in order to keep the rights or something like that, and that is so weak. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I understand. Like, okay, we need something out the door that we can put in a theater. So okay, Rohan, Helm's Deep, get that on camera, animate it, get it out the door. Now we hold our rights to maybe do something else. So
well, I think the issue was that there's a Gollum movie that's planned to come out, I think, next year, 2025, but they didn't realize that pushing it out that far was going to have the IP rights revert. So they did this thing extremely quickly to be able to get it in. They wanted to squeak it in at the end of this year so that they could retain their rights moving forward to, reset the license. So that's, I believe, the story is that someone, I don't know if maybe the Gollum movie was planned to come out this year and had to get pushed or what the situation was. I just know that there's that planned movie and it was their rights were going to lapse. So they really kind of jammed this one out as hard as they could.
It might be from the Silmarillion, but I mean, I'm looking at this. I think the reason they were able to do this is because it's in the appendix of the Return of the King. So remember, they've got that. I don't think they have the rights to the Silmarillion, which no one does. Which is apparently we'll talk about that with the Rings of Power, which we're about to talk about that. So this isn't. This wasn't the War of the Rohirrim. Wasn't a Lord of the Rings What If, and it's not from the Silmarillion. You can find it in the appendix of the Return of the King. In my bound edition, that's all three of them right here. It is page 1000.
Is it that edition?
No, it's not that one. There's no eye. It's got a slip case.
Still nice.
But it's appendix. It's appendix A. It's appendix A when they are talking about the House of Earl. And then a page into that, you get, it says, of the kings of the Mark between Earl and Theoden, most is said of Helm Hammerhand. And so you get a page and a half about Helm Hammerhand in here. So that's where this comes from. So obviously there was a lot added to it. It was long too, by the way. I mean, it's like 2 hours and 14 minutes. So it's also a long movie for what they were showing and what it could have been. I mean, I actually thought I was going into like a 90-minute film, or like it would be like a 90-minute, which would have been fine. But I was expecting like 90 minutes. It was 2 hours and 14 minutes. So you could have also cut it down and probably made it better by getting to it. All right. So that's my thinking. If you're looking for something to go and see this Christmas, I mean, I don't see any reason to recommend this one. It was completely forgettable. I think it will be forgotten. It was nothing, which was kind of expected, but hey, I gave it a try. I did give it a try.
It's good that you gave it a try. I'm very in favor of that. I will likely give it a try as well, but probably not in theaters. I'll probably wait for it to come home on some streaming service or another. I'm going to see a vampire movie this Christmas. I'm going to see Nosferatu. Yes, that is the one that I will be seeing on Christmas. I've already roped Candace into it, so I'm
probably going to see it on Christmas Day as well. Unless like I'm hanging out, I typically go and see my nephews on Christmas afternoon because I like to go see and like see what they got from Santa Claus and what all and hang out with them in the afternoon. So if I'm there too late, it'll probably be the next day before I see it. But if I'm just there for a couple hours, I'm going to go see Nosferatu Christmas Day as well. So I know Dinner Pig Rancher Doug's going to go see it on Christmas Day. Brianna's very excited about it. So there will be discussion of Nosferatu.
We should all get together and talk about it.
Yes,
it'd be fun.
So we will. So okay. So Nosferatu, we've got high hopes for Nosferatu. Now I have seen the trailer for that. That was a while back ago. Because Brianna and I, in fact, I need to wonder if I could promote this in some way. But Brianna and I did cover the original Nosferatu here on the channel already. So we did a show on the original Nosferatu. So we will see how it compares. All right. Well, I think that's all we need to say about the War of the Rohirrim.
All right. See you later, everyone. Thanks for coming by. I'm kidding.
Good night, everybody.
Take care. All right. We can just jump into the Rings of Power then.
Let's go to the Rings of Power then.
I want to say,
you want to tell everybody your approach to this?
Yes. So I want to say up front, I did not watch the Rings of Power, not a single episode. So I cannot comment as to the quality of the show. And I really don't have any desire to do that. I will be commenting on the canonicity of Rings of Power, because even though I haven't actually watched it, I have, of course, seen reviews. I have seen synopses of specific episodes. And so I want to start with that idea that I texted myself about how you need to be faithful and accurate with regard to how you approach Tolkien. And I think that, unfortunately, Galadriel is my favorite character in the entire mythos. She is the only entity that Sauron is scared of, to the point where he avoids her. He will actively seek to avoid her. He does not want to have anything to do with her. And so when they do things like put her up against the necromancer, as we had said in the last conversation in The Hobbit, that kind of rubs me the wrong way. And then when they went in Rings of Power and essentially put her alongside of him to a degree where he was, it seemed, to be actively seeking her out, that bothers me. It's canon breaking. Additionally, when we meet Galadriel in Lord of the Rings, she is world weary because she is a character who has typically had things happen to her. So she's banished to Middle Earth, never to return until she learns her lesson, because she wants to go and found her own kingdom, and she wants to grow it, and she wants for it to be great. And so she's told, you can leave and you can go to do that, but if you choose to leave, you can never return. She needs to learn a lesson to come back. The lesson is her refusal of the ring. But that moment is when she is at her lowest. She refuses the ring when it would make all the sense in the world to take it. And this is because once she arrives in Middle-earth, she arrives with her family, and her brothers die in wars, and her father, I believe, ends up dying, and she's constantly moving around from place to place until finally she gets married and goes to Lorien, and then, has her own kingdom. And it's so pivotally important that she is world weary and at her lowest point when she refuses the ring. And all of that world weariness is because of the weight of her history in Middle-earth. Even still, Sauron wants to avoid her like the plague. He wants nothing to do with her because of how powerful an entity she is. And so when you start to do things like make her a warrior and have her lead and train men, this undermines that lowest point that we see her at, and it makes her refusing the ring less significant. I don't like that. And then, we also have the issues with regard to the Númenóreans. The Númenóreans were elfmen, right? Elros led them. He was Elrond's brother. And there's a lot of, anti-elf sentiment when we find them in the series, I think, at least as I've heard it related to me. And this, again, is canon breaking. So there's a lot of stuff in this series that I just can't jive with because it's not, it's just canon breaking, right? In a very severe way, in a personal way, because Galadriel's my favorite character. Because of what she represents, the goodness that she represents, the ability to choose the right thing in the face of your lowest moment. Like there's a lot there. And for that, I appreciate her the most. So I don't think that was the route that they needed to go. I think that if you're going to do a new story, and I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amazon has rights to the Second Age, which is like, what does that even mean? I don't know if they have specific works that they're entitled to. I don't know the details of their license.
I think it's only the appendix to the Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So my understanding, it's been a while since I've looked all of that up, but like we were just talking about with you, that nobody has the rights to the Silmarillion. You can't do anything in Silmarillion, but the workaround is that, the appendix in the Return of the King covers a lot of the material and not nearly as much depth, but does cover the material. So you can technically be doing a Return to the King adaptation.
Gotcha.
That's my understanding, because you can create from the appendix.
Okay. Well, provided that they set the Rings of Power in the Second Age, I'm going to assume that the Second Age appears in the appendix somewhere.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay. And so, because I'm not super familiar
I'm
with
looking
the
at appendix. I'm just looking at the appendix. I've just flipped over here, but I'm looking at like Appendix B in this, and it gives the year. And Ar-Pharazôn begins the building of the great armament, and then Ar-Pharazôn assails Valinor, downfall of Numenor, Elendil and his sons escape. So I mean, that's written in the back of the Return of the King.
Okay, so I am going to pitch a wholly different story. It's not even about the rings. It's not about the Rings of Power. It's not about any of the characters who we currently know and love, right? Because I think that what you need to do in order to effectively tell a story in Tolkien's world, if you're not going to be faithful to the material that's available, is to tell a story about characters that we know nothing about in as faithful a manner as possible. And I am also going to take into consideration the progressive nature of Amazon's production studios heads. I've read several interviews. They tend to have progressive views, which is fine. Have your progressive views. That's not a criticism. But I think that what we should have gotten, or maybe the approach they should have taken, would have landed them somewhere close to this type of thing that I'm going to describe. So I think what we should have gotten is the Blue Wizards going into the East and the South. I think that if we would have had, what are they, Alatar and Palando, and then later it's Romastamo and Maliatar. Is that his name? Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, I don't know those names.
I'm sorry, Marinatar. So in his early writings, Tolkien called them Alatar and Palando. In his later writings, he called them Marinatar and Romastamo. These writings are in letters, right? So they're not a part of the Lord of the Rings books. They're not a part of the published property or the IP, because Tolkien never wrote these into the IP. These are responses that he gave to individuals who would send him letters and ask him questions like, what are the Blue Wizards? And so what we should have gotten, or at least what I would have loved to have seen, would be, now I think that most everyone is familiar with Alatar and Palando. They show up in the Third Age with all of the other wizards, and they travel into the East. Sauron comes back to the West, and then we never hear from them again, right? You don't know anything about them, but Tolkien has said that he believes that they failed in their mission, much like the other two wizards. Everyone who was in Gandalf failed their mission.
Although Radagast should have gotten more respect.
Yeah, Radagast should have gotten way more respect. He's actually my favorite. I love him, and I love Sylvester McCoy, even though we've had that conversation. We don't need to rehash that. But in his later writings, he did return to this issue, and I'm going to read this directly. This is in The Peoples of Middle-earth, I think, but it's also, I believe, shared in one of his letters. So there was a task to circumvent Sauron, to bring help to the few tribes of men that had rebelled from Melkor worship, to stir up rebellion. So this was their mission, to go into the East and the South and to aid the men in the East and the South. The East is Rhûn, so those are the Easterlings. The South is Harad, which is the Haradrim. And we see both of those peoples in The Lord of the Rings. We see it in the movies. It's in the book. So but they're there. And so they are to sort of foment rebellion and sow discontent and cause disarray among what Tolkien calls the Dark East. They must have had, he then continues, they must have had very great influence on the history of the Second Age and the Third Age in weakening and disarraying the forces of the East, who would both in the Second and Third Age otherwise have outnumbered the West. So they were successful in their mission. But imagine this, right? because the wizards can take whatever appearance agrees with them the most, and they would likely want to fit in with the peoples who they are going to visit, you could have an entirely non-white cast, period, full stop, in a Lord of the Rings setting. And we could be in Rune, and it could be, maybe they split and then they can return together to meet to sort of share notes on how they're fomenting the rebellions or whatever. And so really what I think should have happened is if they would have approached this story to tell it as it would have been told by Tolkien himself, but to make it new and interesting in that it's set in the East and the South, we can see the elements of those areas of the world that are filled with good men and who don't want to worship Melkor. And we could at the same time have an entirely non-white cast. I'm talking everyone, extras, the wizards, that because they'll want to choose forms that resemble the people who they're going to deal with. I feel like this would have been such a successful way to handle it. And so the things that happen in this time period are the blue wizards show up, and so does Glorfindel. So we can have Glorfindel in there, right? He shows up in the Year of Dread when Sauron forged the One Ring and completed Barad-dûr. So we could visit the One Ring, we could visit Barad-dûr. Then they went east, like I said, to Rune and Harad. They were tasked with finding Sauron's hiding place, but they failed to find him. But they did help the tribes of men that resisted Melkor worship, and they did sort of pull from the recruiting pool to evil so that it diminished the size of the armies. And this aided in the defeat of Sauron in the War of Elves and Sauron. And so there was that war that we could visit. And then later on the War of the Ring, but that's something that we can't get to. As far as I was aware, at least when I came up with this idea, this is all stuff they would have had access to. So in their licensing, this is all stuff they would have had access to. And I think had they gone this route, and it doesn't even have to be the Blue Wizards. It doesn't even have to be in Rune and Harad, right? It just has to be a story that's told in the Tolkien tradition that is respectful of the work. And if you really absolutely must impress your own personal political beliefs or views into your media that you're creating, you can do that here. And I don't think that it's a far cry. I don't think that had it been approached like this, it could have been very successful. It would have been interesting. It would not ever have been canon breaking, right? Because none of this is actually canon. So you can even, so in the Third Age, Tolkien had said that he doesn't know what happened to them. Maybe they formed their own magic societies, like these sort of anti-good, sort of almost kind of fell to Sauron worship themselves, magical societies. And so there are these like secret pocketed cults throughout the East and the South. That's not canon, right? So you could probably find a way to write that in. So as long as it's not, as long as it's not a part of the already existing canon and doesn't happen in the books, Lord of the Rings, I feel like that's kind of what they had a license to. Now, if I'm wrong, if I misperceived what exactly they have access to, then it's quite possible that everything that I'm saying is completely moot and invalid. Doesn't matter, because they still could have taken a story in this direction based on things we hadn't seen yet. Huh?
Yes. This still would have been a better story. I agree.
Right. It could have the potential to be far better, far more interesting. Like, we already know everything there is to know about Galadriel. Tolkien told us. We don't need you to revisit that. Let's go in a different direction. And in this way, like you were saying, we could do the, hey, remember the wizards? Remember Gandalf? Here's these other two guys. Isn't this interesting? Remember the armies in Lord of the Rings, the Rune and the Easterlings and the Haradrim? They're over here, but hey, there's a bunch of them that are actually really good and they don't want to help Sauron. Isn't that really cool? Like, subterfuge, pseudo crime procedural almost, because of the secrecy involved with how they would probably want to keep to themselves and be very insulated, be very guarded about who they allow into their smaller pocketed groups, because they don't want to deal with Melkor worship, because you assume that anyone who's worshiping Melkor will just kill you. So it's a very interesting story to tell, and it's never been told. Tolkien did not tell this story.
It was not told, yeah.
And I think that
you're talking about.
Go ahead.
When you're talking about the potential failure of certain missions or things like that, that even lets you add the idea, the current idea of the gray nature, that everything is all good. Like, okay, can we see the good guys fail? Yes, we can, because they didn't succeed in that. So that's also, there's also the option for like Game of Thrones type, good guys failing inclusion in that storyline.
Yeah, and it's, I think that it would be a much more interesting story than just it's a rehash of a story that we know isn't real, or rather the events didn't happen because they're just it's so canon breaking. We know they didn't happen. It's not in the book. It didn't happen that way. This is not what Galadriel did. This is not who she was. This is not who the Númenóreans were. This is not how they ended up being who they were in the Lord of the Rings. It's just it's so drastically, incredibly off-putting to me, especially with regard to Galadriel. But if you tell a story that no one's told before and you do it correctly, you can keep your progressiveness and you can tell a good story within the setting of the Lord of the Rings. And I think that you really, and hey, Amazon, Warner Brothers, New Line, you can have that for free. If anyone will capitalize on that, you can have that, because I would love to see it, right? I'm never going to make it. I can't. I don't know, I'm not a big blockbuster movie studio, but I would love to see something done with the Blue Wizards.
Yeah, well, you know what you could do? I was just thinking about this, that
go for it. What
you could use the generative AI tech.
I guess I could do that.
You could do it. Like, what would the trailer for that look like?
Oh, that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah. This is one of the best uses of generative AI tech I can find. That's like, the visualization of something. Oh, wait, I got this idea.
Yeah.
So what would this look like? You ought to do that. You ought to.
I might. That's a really solid idea, Heath. I'll need to pick your brain with regard to like how you get, like what you use, what generative AI programs you use, how you get it to do what you get it to do. But this is very neat. I think maybe I will undertake this. It's really fun.
That would be real. I would love to see that. I'd love to see that. Like
awesome.
The trailer
I think maybe I'll do that.
Been.
I'll have to back burner it for the moment because I'm in the middle of making this YouTube series, and that's consumed all my free time. But I would absolutely love to do this. I think that could be really great. It could be something.
Yeah, I think it could too. VO just dropped. Google's VO 2 just dropped, and I haven't even gotten to look at it yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm signed up for it. So yeah. I was working on some other things with that today. So yes. So I would love to see that. That would be really neat.
Awesome. Do you pay for any subscriptions to any of the AI? This is a left-hand turn from Lord of the Rings. But
too many.
Oh, you do pay for them. Okay. Well, then I'll have to seriously consider doing that. Because I went to go use Midjourney, and I thought it had a free option. It does not. So
it used to. It doesn't now. I pay for Midjourney, and I'm currently paying for Runway. Although I'm about to stop. I mean, I've used a bunch of them. So yes, we can definitely talk about that.
Yeah. We should.
So yes, that would be really cool. So, but yeah, that does that. Like what you're talking about, let's not tell a story that we already know badly.
Yes. And that's the thing with Helm Hammerhand, right? Like that's a story that wasn't really told in earnest. We have bits and pieces, and they could incorporate those bits and pieces, but like don't just reset it at Helm's Deep. Don't try to reproduce this incredible filmic cultural moment that we all got to experience for the only time in history that we could experience something like that. Like Lord of the Rings was so incredibly groundbreaking. It blew the doors off the hinges at the Oscars for fantasy and sci-fi, just for how many it had won. Sci-fi had previously won, but fantasy was never taken seriously at the Oscars until Lord of the Rings. And everyone went, oh, wait, maybe we should actually be paying attention to this stuff. So you just don't try to. You're not going to do it. You're not going to get there. You're not going to see the top of that mountain. So tell a story that we haven't seen before. Tell a story that hasn't been told, right? That's the point, right? That's the whole object of the game, is to tell a story that hasn't been told before. You could do it in someone else's world. You could do it with someone else's characters. Just make sure that there's not so much there. If you want to have your poetic license, make sure that there's not so much there that there is an inbuilt expectation by an audience or by fans, because you're going to just shoot yourself in the foot like they did with Rings of Power.
Yeah, my brother and his wife are really enjoying Rings of Power. They're one of the few. He's enjoying it, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there are people out there who are really enjoying it. I think it's a very small number, but my brother and his wife also have they have not read the Silmarillion. They are not into anything beyond that. They just sat down to watch this, and they have been enjoying it. But they're the only ones. Megan was also at one of the parties who were like very much against the Rings of Power, because she is definitely Middle Earth Africando, whereas like my brother does not care anything about the canon of
okay,
Lord of the Rings. So they've just been watching it. So there's that. But that's the canon breaking is important, because I don't understand that. Why do you buy the licenses to these large franchises? I mean, the only reason they're worth anything is because of the people who love them and will come out to see them.
Yes.
So that group of people are going to want to see what they know is part of the world. And so I don't understand why you don't lean into that.
I completely agree. I mean, that's the whole point. The whole point of spending the money on the license is because you are expected to, inbuilt receive more money back than what it cost you to get the license, unless it's like some sort of a quota share sort of a thing. And even then, that's even better, because it's probably even less money up front. So I don't understand it either. I don't understand the thought process of, okay, go buy it, and then let's do something that will defy, not even subvert the expectations of, but out and out defy the expectations of the inbuilt audience. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I don't understand that, because when what you're buying, it seems to me, is an audience that's going to be there on day one. I need to buy an audience for this production that's going to be there on opening night, midnight showing. Millions of people are going to be there because they love this so much. Yeah. And then in order to actually be successful beyond that, you have to do something that is going to appeal to people beyond that, so that your built-in fan base shows up, and then it's like, oh my God, I got to tell every friend of mine, and get them in here to see this movie because it was so incredible.
And if we have been taught anything this past decade of film, it's that buying the license will get you the door open, right? But you can still face plant after that. You can trip over the threshold and absolutely kiss the ground. And sometimes there's no recovering from that, right? Like Star Wars is absolutely a mess. Lord of the Rings with Rings of Power, and maybe not necessarily the War of the Rohirrim, but with Rings of Power for sure, giant expenditure, huge amounts of money, completely face planted. And people have left, and it's
it's very difficult to get people back.
Left. Yeah, and people like me who didn't show up in the first place because I kind of caught a whiff. Like I expected it to be, I expected the canonicity to be dubious, and I was not wrong. And it's my favorite character, so I'm probably a little bit more attached than some. But it just isn't. It isn't what it. Not only is it not what it should have been, it's not what it could have been. And what it could have been was really great. And they don't even have to take my idea. They just have to take the sort of the essence of the idea. Tell a story that hasn't been told before. That's all you need.
Was there anything else we need to talk about regarding these two things?
I don't know.
It'll be a rather chill and casual night.
Yeah, really chill casual. Like I'm totally happy to go for an hour. That's really all I have. I wish there was more to it, but like I mean that's really all. That's it in a nutshell. I guess I've thought about it for so long that I've kind of got it distilled down to its.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, like I said, after I watched Rohirrim, I was like, okay, I'm kind of glad I didn't like book people to go watch the movie because we could probably cover it in 20 minutes and just, and be done at the high level.
It's such a shame. It's such a shame.
And it is a shame. It is a shame. There is so much that's like, man, this is a shame. So,
well, I mean, hey,
I didn't know there was going to be a Gollum
movie. Be better.
Movie. I don't think we need a Gollum movie.
I don't either. I didn't think we needed a Gollum game, and that got absolutely just completely destroyed by the critics because of how it didn't even have to do with the subject matter. It was just a bad game mechanically. It was just a bad game.
Wait, where was I going with this? I've been thinking that maybe for a standalone video on this channel, I talk about why we do not want a Darth Vader, or why I do not want a Darth Vader TV series. Because people talk about that, it's like that's because when we were going into Obi-Wan Kenobi, to that TV show, people were saying, "Man, this is the one that's going to bring everybody back." We got Obi-Wan because that was after Boba Fett. It's like, okay, we've been through Boba Fett, and you talk about if you put this is also a major problem in storytelling. I've actually had it in some of my stories long ago. That like you have a really cool character that you want to like this is a really amazing character, and you decide to give them more spotlight, and it actually ruins them.
Yeah.
Boba Fett is one of those characters that happened to. That like, okay, we turned the spot. Now, also it was done badly. So I mean, okay, it was done badly as well. But you need to think long and hard before you take a mysterious character that everyone likes, like Boba Fett, and then really turn the spotlight on them. So they failed on Boba Fett. But then everybody was like, the one thing that can bring everybody back is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay. And I was like, I am skeptical, but and I didn't even finish Obi-Wan Kenobi. I didn't even finish it because I thought it was so bad. But it's like, okay, no, you turn the spotlight on Obi-Wan Kenobi and and it didn't work. And then after Obi-Wan Kenobi, the only thing that they can bring people back is a Darth Vader. Like, let's get Darth. Like, no, have you learned nothing? Have you learned nothing?
Have you learned nothing?
Do not turn.
Go ahead.
Because that's like the cheap. It's like the cheapest gimmick you can say, like Darth Vader TV show. That's like the cheapest thing you can possibly do. And I'm not saying it's impossible to do well, but I'm saying there's a 99.9% chance that would not be done well. I mean, it would take a masterful storyteller to do a Darth Vader TV show well.
Yes. And because, first of all, he is not a character that I want to see so much of. He is dark and brooding and depressing and evil. He actively chose evil and continues to choose evil. That would not be a character that I would want to see that much of. Great villain, one of the best of all time. I do not relate to him. Anakin, sure. Darth Vader, absolutely not. There is no relation there whatsoever. And I think that they may be fooling themselves into thinking that there's a relation there because of Anakin. And there isn't. There just isn't. But let's take a look at the Disney Star Wars track record, right? Every time they try to tell us a story that we've already seen before, it fails. And every time they tell us a new story, it kind of works out, right? So Bad Batch kind of worked out. Rogue One kind of worked out. Rebels was great. The Clone Wars was great. That started before Disney bought them. They did finish through really strong, though. Andor is absolutely fantastic.
I still have to watch Andor. So still have to watch it.
It's a shame, though, because like you get to the point where you have just so much bad that's built up that you just are not really excited to watch what's
and just
good.
so much to keep up with. So much to keep up with, and there's so much bad. So okay, so Andor, because I think didn't Andor come out right after Obi-Wan? I think Andor was the one after Obi-Wan.
Beats me.
I think.
I do not know when it came out.
I think it was because I turned off Obi-Wan and then canceled my subscription. So you're talking about it's difficult to get people back.
Yeah.
So I didn't finish Obi-Wan and canceled my subscription. And then I think Andor might have been the next one. And then people were like, oh, that one was really good. I'm like, well, I'd already turned it off and canceled my subscription.
It's already off.
To get me back. Like what? So
it's just we're just in such an unfortunate rut. You know, Hollywood has unfortunately ballooned their budgets to a point where, you know, spec scripts are just not worth it. New IPs are just not worth it because of the bloat. And I think that, you know, I think that what needs to happen, and we've had this conversation before too, like A24, there needs to be a studio that shows up and says, hey, I'm doing all new IPs. I'm really going to pay attention to them, going to nurture them and foster quality. And A24 is knocking it out of the park. Their budgets have been going up year over year. They're really, really climbing the ladder really quickly. I don't think they've put out a film to date that has been panned or even discussed in with any degree of negativity. But they're lower budget, so they have less reach, right? Because they have to be choosy about the theaters that they put their films into and whatnot. But they really are quality films.
did you have a discussion about Green Knight?
Yeah, but something happened to it, and it just came out in theaters again. I missed it because it wasn't playing right here. We don't have an IMAX theater around here, but I want to have another conversation about that to kind of get it back up. I don't know what happened in the upload. Like, I can see it behind the scenes in YouTube, and I can turn it public, and I've had Candace go try to watch it. It just won't. It's a blank screen.
Okay, that explains that. Because I thought you did, but
we did, but it was Sable and I. But there's something that's, I don't know. It was early on. Maybe I had a setting flip that I shouldn't have. I honest to God don't know why it won't play. But I would like to do that again. And I think Christmas time, I mean, it's a Christmas movie technically. So I think Christmas time would be a great time to do that. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we can get together. I would love to have Sable back, but I'd love to have you a part of that conversation too.
I remember that was one of my Christmas movies one year. Yeah. I think.
Oh, yeah? What's a great Christmas movie?
I think I watched it on Christmas, like on my screen over here, but.
All right, awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll message you guys and I'll see if we can coordinate something for a Sunday night. You know,
that would be fun. That'd be fun. That was such a
upcoming the Sunday after. We'll get to it somewhere.
All right. Well, this might be the shortest table talk episode ever then, but I think we said what needed to be said. So I really appreciate your being here with me, at least allow me to get out my initial thoughts about War of the Rohirrim. So
yeah, well, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to get my, rings of power, quote unquote. I mean, it wouldn't make sense to call what I pitched rings of power because they have nothing to do with it. But that's an idea I've been kicking around for a year or so now, and I appreciate you, bringing me on, and I love the conversation. I love the Lord of the Rings conversations that we have. Going from The Hobbit into this one was just natural, right? So I loved it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you bringing me on.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We're heading into Christmas, so everybody have a wonderful Christmas. And hey, yes, we're gonna be talking about Nosferatu. So if you want to join us for that conversation, do go see Nosferatu because that's going to be the next big one that we talk about here in theaters, that has been in theaters. So everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you all so much. It's been wonderful. I will see you tomorrow morning. Oh, I need to get my Heath Geekverse thumbnail up. So we'll be talking about the white box on D&D on the Heath Geekverse channel tomorrow morning. So, all right, everybody, I will see you there in the morning. Later.
Happy Christmas, everyone. Like and subscribe.